Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're going to recap this week in cannabis from February 15th to the 21st. Now, before we jump in, all I ask is that if you learned something or you enjoy this video, please leave a like on it, as it really helps out my channel, and I do appreciate it. And then, of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss any new future videos. But I would recommend going back and just starting with episode 3 and 4 of Reality Check Cannabis in 2020, which will introduce to you Canadian licensed producers in episode 4, and then US multi-state operators in episode 3. And then you can watch episodes of This Week in Cannabis from October leading up until now, which will provide you on the full context of what we were hoping for in the election, what happened, and what those results promise. So good news is that 37 members of Congress asked Biden to issue mass cannabis pardons ahead of legalization. Now, are any of these members of Congress Republican? Unfortunately not, which is why we needed the Democratic majority in the Senate for any sort of cannabis, reform to happen. So just to reiterate how important that was, but 37 members have sent a letter to President Biden on Thursday calling on him to use executive authority to mass pardon all people with nonviolent federal cannabis convictions. The ask for this unique form of presidential clemency is based on actions taken by Presidents Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter in the 70s to categorically forgive Americans who avoided the draft for the war in Vietnam. Now, main thing to point out is that this just shows power in numbers. And again, that's why we needed that majority. And we do see, some, like, they're calling for something, which is great. That's the first step. And again, ultimately reform is going to be many, many steps throughout this year. These are the catalysts. But Earl Blumenauer, another long-standing congressman at this, and I love this. More than 30 lawmakers joined me and Republican Rep. Barberly, in calling for cannabis justice now. So it's just good to see that this is building, and because of this, state cannabis regulators outline policy priorities as Congress pursues legalization. So these state regulators, see what Congress isn't putting their intentions out there, and so what they're willing to do is like, hey, look, although we're not going to choose a side, we do see that this is going to become a reality, and we need to start, providing assistance to lawmakers, which is great. So this coalition of state cannabis regulators sent a letter to congressional leaders on Tuesday outlining cannabis policy priorities and offering assistance as lawmakers consider a number of reform proposals. And yeah, so they just say here, we're not taking a side for or against it, but we stand by our job to provide policymakers and regulatory agencies with the resources to make informed decisions when considering approaches to cannabis regulation. I'm sure they learned a lot from Canada's mistakes, but again, this just goes to show that, when certain groups start to put their intentions out there, other groups start to, react and listen and move that along. Now, so it's just great to see that, at least the people in power are talking about this. That's ultimately the main thing. Now, a lot of developments in all these states, and I don't want to bore you going through all of them, but marijuana or cannabis legalization legislation is advancing nationwide. And many of these states are actively putting out or introducing adult use legalization bills, and they're getting voted on. And I mean, the steps, again, from my understanding, is the House and then the Senate and then onto the governor's desk to sign. And so New Mexico, they've had several pieces of adult use cannabis legislation. House Bill 12 was approved by the committee on Monday. So basically, just to say, so if you want to read this, I would recommend grabbing the link below. But North Dakota, again, voted on a few pieces and they got approved. Maryland introduced 2 adult use legalization bills. There's been no vote on it, but it's scheduled, but they can vote on it at some point. That's been introduced in their house. Minnesota, they've introduced some bills as well. And the bill, it was approved by members, again, this past week. This is awesome. Hawaii, multiple adult use bills are pending in the House and Senate. And then another one was approved by the Senate committee, the only no coming from a Republican member. Virginia, as we saw, they passed everything last week. There's really no infrastructure or strategy for them to set up like sales or anything like that for adult use or medical yet. But main thing they wanted to essentially do is decriminalize and just get that through. Nebraska, 2 pieces of legislation are pending to legalize adult use, and these hearings were scheduled for Friday. So I did not end up following up on this, but great to see these out of states we did not expect. And then these are the big ones we were expecting. New Jersey. Now, New Jersey's been a bit of a mess, and I'm going to save this for the next one that we get into, but New York also has been a huge mess. But the thing is, we need New Jersey to go first. If New Jersey goes first, then New York will follow, because no one wants to be the first one to do it. I don't know why, but these ridiculous politicians don't want to be the first to do it. And in New York, Cuomo is passing it back and forth to lawmakers, and as we saw, the legislatures did get back to him with some of the amendments that he wanted. So that's progress there. And then in Connecticut, we did see that a bill was introduced for adult use as well. And that's just one thing that many people in the space were saying, is that once New Jersey goes, then New York and Connecticut will, but they will not go until New Jersey does. Now, just to add a few things from Governor Wolf, this is in Pennsylvania. I want to see Pennsylvania begin the process to legalize adult use cannabis this year. The profits from this measure would be help us recover from COVID. Yeah, no duh. And it's past time that we restore the justice. And just like everyone, if you're not paying attention, look how much progress has been made recently. And I know it doesn't look like a lot, but we're only heading in that direction. We're not going backwards. And I mean, the people would not allow that to happen, you hope. Another one, Wisconsin, they were not included in this one, but we did want to introduce that they have released a budget plan, calls for legalizing both medical and recreational cannabis in the state, which is huge. And then New Jersey lawmakers approve latest cannabis cleanup bill amid week of uncertainty. So yeah, we were getting no answers last week, and basically their deadline to act on the November vote, where most people from New Jersey said, yes, we want to legalize for adult use, do this. Their deadline was Friday. And so it's been a rocky road. New Jersey voters approved, or since they did it, but on Friday, a key Senate committee advanced a cleanup bill. So the Senate committee, the lawmakers, passed this cleanup bill, which apparently had the changes made that would allow Governor Phil Murphy to sign it. And the deadline has been moved from Friday to Monday. So we're literally waiting on Monday for really big news. And if Phil Murphy signs this, that's fantastic, because it just keeps the ball rolling, and that's going to make New York and Connecticut act sooner. Now, legislature has already been sent enabling legislation on the governor's desk. He's yet to take actions because he's pushing for the inclusion of cannabis-related penalties for underage people. Now, I'm a bit confused because I've read different angles from what Governor Phil Murphy wants. As amended, the legislation would make underage possession of cannabis subject to a written warning, which is not a penalty. So, clearly the amendment is not what he wanted, but we're just going to have to wait and see. So let's just hope, we're waiting tomorrow on Monday to see what happens. So that's huge. But good news out of New Jersey, at least, besides this, is that court ruling paves way for New Jersey to expand medical cannabis market, because that's also a fact. It's like New Jersey, appellate court lifted a 2019 order preventing the state from issuing an additional 24 medical cannabis licenses. The decision could allow for expansion in the medical cannabis industry in the state, perhaps before the launch, potentially later this year, of an adult use market, which again, that's in the plans. Monday is big for that day. Now, industry officials say New Jersey's existing 24 medical dispensaries, or just basically what they have now, is not sufficient to meet the demand. Yeah, not at all. And the ruling today is a step in the right direction for the state of New Jersey to not only meet the demands of existing patients, but to eventually increase supply to meet the demand of the new adult use market. And that's the same thing Canada went through. You don't open enough stores, it just looks terrible, because you're just not able to eliminate the black market, which is the whole point of doing this in the first place. And also the tax revenue and the jobs. But so that's it for all the government stuff. Now we're going to get into the the financials. And this is exciting, because we're going to compare a Canadian LP right now to a US MSO and just see how, where they're both at. So with Tilray, they released their earnings. Revenue increased 26% to $210.5 million in 2020 compared to the prior year. So notice this, 26% increase over the prior year. That's 26% year-over-year growth. That's not big at all. Net loss of $3 million compared to $219 million in Q4 of 2019. That's an improvement, and achieved adjusted EBITDA goal of $2.2 million in Q4 of 2020. Now, they're obviously waiting for their deal to go through with Aphria, which would then combine Tilray and Aphria to become the new Tilray, which is mainly Aphria. But they have a lot of cash. Now, one thing I just want to point out is for everyone that believes that, the international market is going to grow a lot faster than they think it's going to grow really quickly, look at the international medical revenue that Tilray made in the last 3 months. $11.6 million in 2020, up from $4 million last year ago. $4 million to $12 million. Although that was 191% growth, $4 million to $12 million. And Tilray right now is actually valued at $4.6 billion. So I'm just pointing out to people that are optimistic that, companies like OGI, Tilray, and all these things but their international footprint is going to make a big deal. No, not for a very long time. That is why, again, we'll get to it, but the opportunities with US MSO. So I just wanted to point that out, but Tilray's change from 2019 to 2020, 17 million up to 25 million, 3.3 million up to 4.2 million Canadian medical, we need the medical markets to expand eventually. And again, total cannabis revenue, such small numbers. from 28 million last year to 41 million, 46% growth. So just want to point that out. Like, for a company that's valued at 4.5 billion, this makes very little sense to me. And that's why I'm, again, cautioning getting in now to Canadian LPs, because they're definitely close to the overvalue range. Where if you look at Terrace End, okay, Terrace End is actually valued at 2.3 billion. So Tilray is valued at 4.6 billion, making 210.5 million, and profitability of just 2.2 million. Terrace End is worth 2.3 billion, and they've pre-announced. So again, this is just a very quick snapshot, but they've pre-announced full year of net sales of 198 million and adjusted EBITDA of 60 million. That's 58 million more than Tilray's 2.2, right? And so if we look through just a few things, full year net sales of 198 million, adjusted EBITDA of 60, fourth quarter sales of 65 million, representing growth of 28% quarter over quarter and 152% year over year, where Tilray's is 26% growth year over year. This is 28% quarter over quarter, 152 year over year. Fourth quarter adjusted EBITDA of 26 million, representing growth of 46% quarter over quarter. Yeah, right? This is where the real growth is. Now, just want to point out, though, that I found this quite interesting, and I just have never looked into Terrace End. They weren't a company that jumped on my radar and thought, I need to buy them. And there are many opportunities out there. So not that there's anything wrong with them. I just didn't look. And this is interesting. Terrace End is a leading North American cannabis operator with vertically integrated operations in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and California, in addition to operating as a licensed producer in Canada. How do they do that? So if anyone knows how they can do that, maybe because they became an MSO first and then an LP, please let me know in the comments. But I noticed that. I found that interesting. But Terrace End reiterates 2021 guidance. So for this year, net sales of 360 to 380 million and adjusted EBITDA of 140 to 160 million. So this just goes to show that they can be that confident that they're going to do this guidance because of what the U.S. market is actually promising versus, Tilray can't promise this sort of growth because the Canadian market and the international market, as of right now, because the laws don't allow it. So that is the first big difference. Now, if we jump over to Todd Harrison, another great resource, he just pointed out here that this is just a little story I wanted to show you. Cannabis firm Terrace End embarked on an ambitious goal in January. Its leaders set out to raise 50 million, a figure in line with the company's total quarterly revenues, and a bold gambit given the industry's financial struggles, and based on the last year of the Rona situation and just lack of capital. It turned out they were too humble because Terrace End isn't alone. Cannabis companies have collectively raised roughly $2 billion this year in 2021, a 60% jump compared to 2020. So as things are rebounding, people are realizing, yes, the opportunities are really in cannabis. Five out of the 10 largest equity deals ever done for American cannabis have been done in the first 6 weeks of 2021. So again, it's in the U.S., folks, and I'm going to help you see that through this. If you want to get rich on cannabis stocks, you need to know the crucial difference between U.S. and Canadian cannabis companies. U.S. companies are overlooked by many investors, and any state and federal legalization favors them over the Canadian rivals. Now, this is where recreational cannabis is legal, very few states, but, Illinois has a large population, California. This is where we have the legal markets, recreational. But again, medical is open in 38 states, so that's quite large. If we go to Canopy, we'll go down to the numbers. Just basically, this is as straightforward as it gets. If we look at these numbers, these are the recent quarters marked by revenue. Q1, the recent quarter in Q1. And at the top, we have Canopy growth, at the top of the list, Canopy growth, 117 million in sales, up from 102. Aphria, 122, up from 108. Tilray, 57, up from 51. Kronos, Aurora, no growth, okay? Not great, just because it just shows that they're overvalued. And when we look to MSOs, Curaleaf, 182, up from 117. Green Thumb, 157 million, up from 120 million previous quarter. True Leaf Cannabis, up 136 from 121. Cresco Labs, 100 up, revenue of 153 million, up from 94 the previous quarter. And so just look at the total revenue brought in this year, 359 million versus 629 million. There's no contesting. That's simply just it. And when you look at the size of the markets, the Canadian market, actually, we'll get into that. So I'm not going to get off track right now. Look at how much money was lost by the Canadian licensed producers. Aphria was the one with net operations of profitability. The rest have lost a ton of money from operations. And if we look at how the MSOs are faring with that, expanding more is obviously causing some companies like Curaleaf to go from positive to negative, but that's part of growing. But look at the overall, $4 million was lost from net cash operations versus 168. So this article is a great reference if you want to read through the whole thing, but I just wanted to show you the important parts that, yes, the Canadian market is so much smaller. It's 1/9 of the U.S. market. So that's why the opportunity really does sit in the U.S. Michigan cannabis sales increased 7% in January to $108 million. Michigan began 2021 with a 7.2% gain in overall cannabis sales, which reached $108.5 million, up from 210% a year ago. And Michigan Cannabis Regulatory Agency breaks out sales by medical and adult use. So medical sales improved 63% from a year ago to $41.1 million, and adult use sales soared 588 to $67.4 million. And so that is huge. And that just goes to show that the more states that legalize for adult use, we're going to be able to see growth like this. That's where it comes from. And just to point out, Florida's cannabis industry nearly doubled jobs, approaching $1.2 billion in sales in 2020 alone. This is Canada's numbers in 2019. So Florida did what Canada did in its first year in 2020. Isn't that crazy? So just to point that out, I'm not going to get into the details. You can read through if you want, but that's a fact. So for anyone that thinks, oh no, but like the international market's going to open up, doesn't matter what's going to open up. You got to follow the money. You got to go where the money is. And TruLeaf Confident, they're announcing the resale registration statement on Form S1 declared effective. So I think all this means is that they are preparing to uplist. So either, the CEOs know something I don't, or they're just confident that, the momentum is moving in the right direction. They're getting ready to uplist. Now, after that news, which was great to see that we got Curaleaf, reports fourth quarter fiscal year. They've announced the date. They're going to release earnings on March 9th. So March 9th is one of the first days that we can expect a catalyst, because Curaleaf is going to put up numbers over 200 million in just their quarter. So that's awesome. And I'm going to take a break and just let you listen to a few different people in the industry saying similar things to what I'm saying, and just let you, take this and weigh it against what you know. And it's just, this is a great clip.
And valuations that really don't reflect even the growth here. Any sense on where the industry should trade on a multiple? Because there's growth industries that we've been talking about on the show that trade, 5, 10 times. And so the re-rating process, in my view, has just begun.
2018 with the Canadian market.
Totally correct. It's an amazing opportunity for U.S. investors to invest in the great American growth story. There's a decade of growth coming here. Stocks are too cheap. I was on your show when the stock was half the price it is today, and I said it's too cheap. It's still too cheap because the consumer is choosing this. There's structural irregularities in the system that make it so cheap, but that doesn't prevent our business from being profitable and from the ability to grow. And for our ability to take that capital that we just raised, invest it inside the business, and create astronomical returns for shareholders.
Better if you said
I heard you quote Ben Graham a few minutes ago, short-term voting, long-term weighing. That's exactly right. And people are just learning how to vote for cannabis. You cannot even buy U.S. MSOs on Robinhood.
Yeah.
Structurally, this thing has not evolved all the way. We are still in price discovery. Equities are an amazing opportunity for people who can understand and get in.
Yes. I love that. And this is just a point of when things don't make sense, there's money to be made, right? This is such an example of perception and reality not lining up, that's where money can eventually be made. Now, just want to point out, so Prohibition Partners has put out some numbers based on Germany's revenues this year. And Q4, the amount of medical cannabis they imported reached an all-time high in Q4. But this is something that I need to break down to show you that, although this looks promising, it doesn't mean much, because Germany imported 3,264 kilograms of medical cannabis in Q4 of 2020, the largest amount for any quarter to date, bringing the yearly total to 9,200 kilograms, okay? Now, so for people thinking, but Germany's going to be big, look, Afria's last earnings, if we look at how many kilograms they sold in just the last 3 months in Canada, they sold 26,730 kilograms for net cannabis revenue of $67.911 million. So this number is peanuts. And that's just the truth. This is a very small amount of kilograms. So even if you're making $5, net per gram, or even $10 net per gram, this is not numbers that's going to make any Canadian LP look more attractive than a U.S. multi-state operator right now. And in the past, the demand for medical cannabis flower in Germany has been met primarily with imports for cannabis. But the other thing to point out down here, in the near future, we expect to see the balance of supply shift away from the Netherlands and Canada to include other countries too. So it's not just Canada is getting the advantage of medical, but the other thing to point out, where was this? Domestic cultivators will supply Germany with at least 2,600 kilograms of medical cannabis per year, though these quantities could be exceeded. Again, 2,600 is nothing. It's peanuts. But the good news is that domestic cultivators will supply, that's a FRIA. Domestic cultivators will supply at least 2,600 kilograms because they are the only ones that have an up and running facility that they've built in Germany. So that's a nice positive. But again, just to kind of show you where we actually are, globally and in Canada, and just to show you that the opportunity is really for growth in the U.S. Now, the good news is that the Canadian numbers are in, and if we go through December, definitely bounce back from November. And we saw sales of $298 million, led by a jump of $12 million in Ontario. And again, this is likely by the stores, and a jump in Quebec by $6 million and $9 million in Alberta mainly. So this is awesome. But what this does was that this brings Canada's total sales for 2020 to $2.6 billion, which is up 120% from 2019, which is great. That is great growth. And that is, again, why I own a FRIA long term. I still want to own them, to potentially be the future Amazon of medical cannabis. That's why I'm holding on to these Aphria shares long term, and why I've also taken profits, or a majority of profits already, because I think right now is a good time. Again, I'm not buying Canadian LPs. That's all I can say is I think they're overvalued right now. But again, I'm holding long term. I'm trying not to worry about the daily fluctuation because my intention is to hold them for a very long time. 5 years, a decade. Now, not going to get into the details, but basically this just gives a snapshot because I know this is a longer video and I really just want to give as much value as possible. So you can read through this if you want, but that's great. Canada is growing and there is progress, but it's only as quickly as Ontario can open stores. But the good news is that Ontario is increasing the rate of cannabis retail authorizations to 30 a week. So as mentioned previously, in September, they were going from 10 to 20 stores a month. Or no, they were going to 10 stores. I forget what it is. But in September, they were opening 20 stores a month. By December, they announced they would open 40 a month. By January, they announced they'd open 80 a month because I think Canada is realizing too, oh, this is money for us. We like this. And as of February 16th, they've announced 30 a week, which becomes 120 stores opening a month. So previously, I was saying we're going to have 1,300 retail cannabis shops by the end of 2021. It seems with 30 a week now, 120 a month, we're going to have more than 1,500. So again, this is promising Canada. But again, you can invest in the Canadian companies and wait a couple years for this growth, or you can get into the U.S. right now and really try to capitalize on the upcoming growth in existing states like Illinois that are growing like crazy, but then also Arizona and the New Jersey, hopefully soon, if things can go on schedule. But again, just another talking head on TV. And again, I know I talk crap about a lot of these talking heads, but I'm bringing on people that have the same sort of view that I have. And I mean, I've been saying this for a long time, and these are people that are echoing what I'm saying. So again, take it with a grain of salt. I mean, it is at least as reputable, as long as you think it makes sense, then I think, there's no reason not to take this seriously. But just another talking head sharing his perspective on why he thinks U.S. multi-state operators are a better opportunity than Canada.
How do you reconcile that tension where on one hand the Canadian names are running up because of what's going on in the U.S., but your preference is for those already existing U.S. producers?
Nothing more, nothing less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is certainly a lively discussion right now, sort of Canada versus the U.S. It's my belief that many of these Canadian companies will enter the U.S., but at the same time, you have to think about they are trading at 3 to 5 times or even greater valuations than their U.S. counterparts. So you can buy them at these lofty multiples, and then they'll have to dilute to enter the U.S. Or you can buy companies that are already in the U.S. that trade at a third to a fifth of the valuations of their major exchange-listed peers. And so right now, we like to call Canada a trade, but really for a long-term investment, the U.S. is where you want to be.
Exactly.
How do you...
One other clip I want to point out here.
Going back to what I was saying before of measuring out sort of what happens when these states legalize as these companies TAM, total addressable market, increases. And so you can sort of work your way into a range of what's a reasonable intrinsic value, and then understand that due to various retail trading dynamics, we very well may overshoot that. And so when I'm advising clients right now, it's to continue buying U.S. cannabis shares. Be ready for the fact that they very well could overshoot, sometime after uplisting. And so, be ready to sort of trade around that. But, we are very bullish overall on the fundamentals, think that these are despite the very large run, undervalued based on their long-term fundamentals. And so, we're buyers for that. If we get swept up in some maniacal trading, so be it. Practice some risk management, trim some positions. But it is our belief that these stocks are undervalued and will continue to rise here.
And so I want to point out that this Eric Deslauriers, this money manager, is speaking on behalf of Craig Hullum, an investment firm. And they're voicing a lot of what these other firms are saying, is that we see the opportunity in the U.S. companies. So the moment that, they can uplist and that we can get our hands on them, we're going to overshoot. And what that to me means is that they're going to send them up very high. They're going to send the prices up. And where he's saying is that when we overshoot, and they're going to trade around that, that's where I think it's so important to have your exit prices. And we're going to get to my plan in a sec. But I think everything there is just saying what they plan to do once they can uplist and once they can actually get in. And that's just, I think this to me is the writing on the wall. I don't know about you. Let me know in the comments. But that's what he's telling us. He's like, we intend to go full out on these companies. We may overshoot them, which is why you have to practice some risk management and why you want to trim some positions and why you want to have some, set prices where you're going to sell some shares in order to lock in profits. And that's sort of, I hope that can help sort of tie this all together and provide context to what my plan is and what you've seen in my past videos and what I'm going to show you in a sec. So again, when we look at Canada, 2.6 billion in sales for 2020. If we look at cannabis sales, the average Americans bought 71% more cannabis to survive 2020. Okay? Americans purchased 18.3 billion in cannabis products over 2020. So there's no competing. There's nothing. No comparing. 2.6 billion in 2020 or 18.3 billion, which likely means that, hey, Canada next year could do 4 billion or 4.5 billion, especially as they open 120 stores a month. While the U.S. is, likely going to jump another 50 to 70% up to 22 billion. We don't know. But I hope you see what I see now at least. And this just, because I also had wishful thinking in 2018 when I was inexperienced and I didn't understand how to value companies. And I thought Afria would just keep going. Oh, it's just going to keep going because legalization's coming. No, you got to go where the money's actually being made. And that's why there's more margin of safety in these MSOs because they're valued less. Therefore, they have more upside over time once all these catalysts come. And the U.S. and the Canadian licensed producers are right now overvalued because they're too expensive compared to the fundamentals and the money they're bringing in. And hence, that's just why I want to warn people to be careful and not to, not to rely too much on hope of the future. And again, you got to look at where the money's being made. So just to clarify and show you all, I did get into Cresco this week. I got in at a higher price, but I didn't care because I didn't want to not be able to get in under $20 and then cheap out on a few cents over the long run, right? So I ended up getting in. I bought Vireo on Thursday, actually, and I bought Cresco on Wednesday. And look, I'm all set now. I'm so happy. I have 1,850 or 1,850 Afria shares. So my plan is still to consider selling 300 of those shares before the merger if Afria sees another spike. Mainly because I've decided that I want to keep 1,550 shares going in, which converted is a little bit more than 1,300 Tilray shares. So I figure by keeping a maximum of 1,550 Afria shares, that will get me after the merger 1,300 Tilray shares, and I can let that grow forever. That's my plan there. And then so now with Cresco, I've got 1,035 shares. So I'm locked and loaded. Harvest 2,500 shares. I do have HMUS. Again, this was one I bought in 2018, and then I started buying a lot more of it when it was down to bring down my average cost. And what actually happened, HMUS did a unit consolidation. So for every one share that you had, you actually got 3 shares, but they brought the price down by 1/3. So originally, like last week, HMUS was about $36 a share, and I had 100 shares. Now they've decreased it by 3, and I get now I have 300 shares, which is awesome. So that for me is more of just like a cash cow. And in the future as well, if I ever need cash, I can just withdraw it from HMUS because it's more of just like that's what I initially got into and I didn't understand this enough. But now that I understand this and I've been doing all the work and learning over time, that's where I picked individual companies because obviously you're going to see a lot more growth. And now I have about 19 grand in Cresco, 12 grand in Harvest, and 7 grand in Vireo. And I'm very happy about that because I only see that going up. And that's where now Vireo I'm sitting with 1,800 shares. And then TBP is a high risk biopharma play that I have. It's 5 grand in there. If it does go up to, a couple dollars, that's great. If it doesn't, but I do believe in revolutionizing the pharmaceutical industry with cannabinoid-based, THC medicine, and that's what TBP does. So I do plan to do future videos to cover each of these individually. So I know I've said that for some time too, but I've just got to get some stuff sorted out on my end. But basically now I'm locked and loaded. I've got very little cash left, but I've gotten, whatever that 20 something grand of cash that I've had in the last few weeks, it's now been put back into US MSOs, and I'm chilling for the rest of 2021. And just to show you, this is the plan I've made so far. It's like, well, I don't know how big they're going to get, and this plan can change, but what I am doing is I'm just watching, and I'm looking to see what these what's going to happen. Like I'm watching, I'm following the catalysts, and if something were to suddenly pop up that makes me believe that I'm not able to get to these points, I will adjust my plan then. But as of right now, again, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't. Safe Banking Act, Curaleaf is going to announce March 9th, and then GTI is going to announce March 16th. So at least we should have a few weeks of people starting to pay attention to the fact that these MSOs are making way more money than the Canadian LPs. But this is again my plan. When Cresco hits $50, I'll sell 400 shares. That will give me my cash back that I invested in it. When Harvest hits 15, I'll sell 800 shares, which will give me my cash back. And then when Vero hits 12, I'll sell 600, which will give me my cash back. And again, I'm not looking to hope that these go up forever. I'm invested in companies that I think do have promise to grow by at least 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 times, maybe in this year, just based on all the catalysts. Excuse me. And again, I could be wrong, but that's just what I think based on, what we see with Canadian LPs trading on the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ and the type of volume that they see because they're simply placed on those exchanges. I don't see why US MSOs are not going to have the exact same impact once they can uplist on those exchanges. And then they show that they're doing better and whatnot, right? So just wanted to show you all of that. And again, show you what I'm doing because this is my reasoning behind it. HMUS is exactly sort of like a cash reserve. Oh, hey, Blake. So, but yeah, and just to get this math, it's like $50 times 400 will tell you how much, if you take the share price and multiply it by the number of shares, it will tell you the amount of cash that you would be able to withdraw. So that's just how I did the math as well. It's quite simple to get there. But yeah, that's it. I apologize this video was a bit longer, but I really wanted to go deep and give as much context as possible. I actually do plan to release a bit of a special video tomorrow, really going through just like why US MSOs have more upside, and I'm going to do a more in-depth video on that and release it because I have the day off and I'm going skiing with my grandpa, so I'm very excited. And lastly, though, this is another great resource by someone on the internet. I want to thank him, though, Matt Fawnin. So you can thank him, obviously, if you want, but I just want to share this because it's something I found, something I came across, but it's an education on the US MSOs. Welcome to the MSO gang. Basically goes through the vocabulary legend, what all these things mean, what you want to look for, and really it's an education in MSO. So I don't see anyone that's interested in investing in cannabis should go through this document. It's a great resource, again, by awesome people online that are trying to spread awareness and show people like the real opportunity versus what you're just kind of being showed out there on TV if you watch. Again, I think we know at this point, TV is not your friend. TV is not there to educate you. It's there to entertain you and cause your emotions to rile up. And unfortunately, that leads people to make worse decisions than they would have. So I invite you to go through all this. It's great, but that is it for this week's episode, everyone. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like. Let me know in the comments what you think. Are you getting into US MSOs? Are you sticking with Canadian LPs? Do what you please, but I do hope that you can at least see where the money is based on what I've shown you here. And if you want to take advantage, that'll be great because I do think that this year is going to be very fruitful for those that do. So thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Please subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you. I'll see you tomorrow with that special video, and then Wednesday back for a midweek update. Have a great one, everybody.